Producers in the U.S. aren't the only farmers concerned about the impacts of Prop 12. Host of Real Ag Radio, Shaun Haney, joins us now for an outlook. Shaun, thank you so much for being here. So talk about how this legislation could impact Canadian producers.
Great to be with you here this morning. So yeah, this is an interesting one because, I think we tend to think about this as like this is a, American issue that, it disadvantages producers across some of the major pork producing states. Well, quite frankly, it also potentially impacts producers in some of the exporting countries like Canada as well. And, we know the Canadian and U.S. pork sector, highly integrated. There's a lot of trade that goes back and forth. California, for example, the first state that did this, is a very large economy, not to be ignored, quite frankly. And so the Canadian Pork Council has a lot of questions in terms of how exports are going to be treated. And of course, it's not Health Canada's job to make sure they're doing inspections related to one state, or now we got Massachusetts as well, but two states' requirements in terms of how pork is produced. And so is this essentially some sort of non-tariff trade barrier that has been created that would really disadvantage Canadian pork being able to be exported into a state like Massachusetts or California? So they are quite concerned.
So a big issue there, bringing up trade. So the question is, do you see Canada, would they file a dispute resolution panel under the USMCA?
I asked Stephen Heckbert, who is the executive director of Canadian Pork Council, if they would go to that length. He said way too early to make that sort of claim or put that on the table, but he did say they're looking at all the options as they get a better understanding here of what some of the requirements are going to be for Canadian exports. I'm sure other countries are also doing the same. One of the challenges here is we tend to deal country to country, and here we have individual states making up rules that are different than what the national requirement would be. That adds some extra steps in here. So you essentially have Canadian officials dealing with Washington, who are then dealing with the individual states. You can see how there's going to be a real issue when it comes to communication to resolve this.
So it's interesting to see how that'll play out again as you address export issues here. So before I let you go, Shaun, other thoughts on the impact or this ripple effect of Prop 12 and how you see this playing out up there?
Yeah, I'm super curious what we see some of the major retailers do, because when we have like the Walmarts and the Costcos of the world that are such big protein retailers, do we start to see them procure protein specific to how like only a certain way going into California, and then they treat the rest of the U.S. a different way? Or does this become kind of a national thing, the way that they procure something like pork, which would really that essentially makes it very challenging for a lot of states and exporters as well. So I think watching how the major retailers handle this is very something to follow closely.
Yeah, that's a good point. Bringing up a host of questions. Thank you so much, Shaun. Always appreciate your insight. As host of Real Ag Radio, that's Shaun Haney. You can catch Shaun on his show, Real Ag Radio, which airs at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. That's weekdays on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. Love having him join us here on the Market Day Report.